So now we're going to put the piping cord into the bias that you've prepared. I've just got one long strip with nicely pressed open seams now. And I'm going to get my bias and just put it in the centre, fold it over and just pin it in like that to make sure that the edges come together. Push it with your fingers and get it quite close to the piping, and do that all the way along, ready for you to machine the piping in. So when you come to the join, it's just going to go across the join, and the join will barely show because it's at a diagonal. It doesn't really show when it's in the cushion at all. So we're going to get all that ready to sew, and then we're going to use the piping foot to sew this in position. Now this is what the piping foot looks like. On the back it's got 2 grooves, and on the top it's just got the flat bar to put it on with, and a sort of central hole. This is just a universal one. You can get them for your own machine, like a Benina or a Janome or a Brother foot, but generally speaking the universal feet will fit all machines now that have the universal fitment, and that includes all those machines, and Auna and Brother, and the Benina Bonnet range, which is the one I've got, uses these feet. Okay, so I'm going to put the foot on. So all I have to do is drop the existing foot off by pressing a little button at the back. Make sure you don't lose that. Slide that on and just lower the pressure foot with your hand onto that bar, and it clicks on and it's ready to go. So I'm going to get all these prepared and then we'll come back and start sewing them in. Okay, so we're ready to sew the piping in now. I've got it all pinned along. Now start probably about 10 centimetres from the end. You won't need to have that joined because when we're joining the piping we need to open it anyway. So start about 10 centimetres. I mean, ideally you've allowed enough to go around each cushion plus about 10 or 15 centimetres extra, maybe even 20 centimetres extra just for the join, because otherwise it's difficult if you've only got small pieces. So start a bit further in. Now put the piping under the piping foot and you'll see there's 2 grooves, and when your needle goes down you want it to be going right into the edge of the piping. So put your foot down and you'll probably find it's just under that first groove. Put your needle in, take that pin out. For this I'm using very long glass headed pins because I find that when I get to the velvet it's quite hard to get them in with the normal pins, they tend to bend. So these are glass headed pins that I use for curtain making. They're about a good 2 inches long, and the ends don't melt when you iron, if you accidentally iron them either. Okay, so I'm going to keep my fingers running along that bit of piping there, just like that, because I'm just holding it in while the machine does the job. Now you don't really need to reverse because we're probably going to have to unpick a bit to do the join anyway. You could lengthen your machine stitch a bit so it goes a little bit quicker, because this is going to be machined on again onto the actual cushion cover as well. So just run along, stop when you get to a pin, take it out, and you'll see that the machine is really doing it for you. Well, the piping foot is. You don't really need to have to do much. It's going to get it beautifully in. Going over a join there. And you can see you'll end up with the piping beautifully sewn in, and that's what you need to apply it to your piece of fabric for your cushion cover. Okay, so I'm going to machine all these and then we'll move over to the table to apply it to the squares that we've cut out. So now we're going to apply the piping cord to the squares that we've cut, and I'm using the contrast piping on the floral square. So first of all, make sure that your edges are together, so edge of the fabric, edge of the piping. Start in the middle, probably at the bottom, because obviously this is the way the fabric goes out. I'm going to make a join here at the bottom in the centre. So start off with pinning your, leave about 15 centimetres, 10 centimetres extra, and start pinning it on like this along the edge. When you get to the corner, obviously you can't just turn the corner, you need to cut it. So what you need to do is an inch back from this edge, and have a tape measure if you're not sure about what that is. So an inch back from that edge, you're going to do a cut in your bias right up to the stitching. It doesn't even matter if you cut the stitching, because you're going to be sewing this on again. And then pin that to the corner, and then turn it and do a really nice square at the corner, and carry on pinning and turn it round. I'm going to pin all the way along, and then when you get to the next corner, do the same thing again, an inch back, do a clip right up to the stitching as far as you can, because you need to do that in order for it to be a nice square. Otherwise it won't be a nice square, it will be like a roundy edge. Make sure it's a really nice square like that. Carry on pinning. It's quite thick where the joins are. That's why we need to change our needle. Just keep the edges together. Again, do that cut an inch from the edge. Do the turn. Down this side. Now sometimes fabric shunts. That means that as it goes along, it moves. And for that reason, sometimes you won't really know if your fabric's going to do that until you get on the sewing machine. But if you want a little insurance policy in case that is going to happen, what you can do is do your inch, you'll cut an inch from the end, and then do a few others either side, so that if it does shunt, you've got some to be able to turn it wherever you are. You won't need to cut it again when you're on the sewing machine. But I'll show you that when we get on. If I need to do it, I can show you. So I'm just going to choose the one that's on the corner. Make sure the edges are out. Like that. And then I've come to the bit in the middle where I need to do my join. Now just cut a bit off. You know, there's a little bit extra. Leave a little bit extra there as well. And cut it. And now you're going to need to unpick that piping, just so that you can get into the piping cord. So I've just got my unpicker, and I'm just going to, this is already open quite a bit, but I will need to strip it back a bit more. So I'm going to go in, cut the edge, and just stitch rip that back. Quite a way really, in order to do this join. Maybe even a bit more than that. And then the same on this side. I'm just going to take that pin out and open this one up as well. It's better to open up more than you need than to be struggling to do this join. Even a little bit more than that. Okay, so I've got them nicely opened up. Oh, that's a bit very cool. Can you see? And then what I'm going to do, on one side, I'm opening up my bias, and I'm going to do a right angle fold again. So that is a right angle there. Okay, and then the other piece, I'm just going to lay across it like that. And then I'm going to open it up, and where that fold is where my join's going to be. And you should find that it's got right angles again. Everything's at right angles. Now the other little tip is often you just need to tighten it a little bit. So just move it back a little bit. And then what you're doing is a join from corner to corner again. Can you see all these right angles? Right angle, right angle, right angle, right angle. So join it across like that. And then just check that you've got it right. You can see, look, that is going to be good. It's not too baggy. So if I'm happy with that, I could cut those off. I'm just going to show you another way of doing it, because obviously that's quite tricky if you're not used to doing a bias join. It's just what we did in the piping actually when we prepared the piping originally, but now you're doing it while it's on the cushion, which is a little bit harder. So the other thing you can do, and you do see this done in shop bought cushion covers, is just trim one back a bit, fold the edge under and lay the other side across it and trim that one, and we're just going to fold them, and they'll be like a piece that's not joined, but it's so small you don't see it when it's actually in the cushion. But I'm going to do a bias join because I think they look nicer. Made it harder for myself now because I've chopped a bit off, but never mind. Just going to lay that over that. I'm going to open it back up again, find my square, maybe move it over a little bit just to make it a bit tighter. Just check it's okay. Yeah, that looks tight enough. So if I'm happy with my join, I can trim off what I don't need. And then I'm going to go to the machine and machine across that, just like we did on the bias before we put the piping cord in. Okay, so it's now sewn. So what I can do now is open it up, press that if you can, then lay your piping cord over the join and just trim it. Actually, I'll do it the other way. Lay that one over that one. Just trim it. Get past the join, in other words. You don't want a join on join. And then just get the other piece and just don't cut it at the same, just maybe 1/2 centimetre proud of each other, because you'll find when you fold it and put it in, they pull back a bit and then they butt up exactly. And you're just going to put them in and get some pins in on that bit that you've joined. Now, this is all well and good, providing my fabric doesn't shunt. So often I won't do that join until I've sewn all around this, and then I do the join last. Because if your fabric is going to shunt, then that join's no good. You're going to have to unpick it and redo it. So that's just a little tip. Get that pinned on with the pieces ready to join. Sew all around here with your piping foot and just finish. Then come back to the table, do your join, pin it, and just go over that last. Okay, so we're going back to the machine now, and just like when you sewed in the cord, you're going to sew all around this. When you get to the corners, you put your needle down and turn the corner at a right angle, go along there and put your needle down. And then you can do that to all your cushions that you're going to make. I've got 4 to make, so I'm going to do it to all 4. And then we'll be ready to put the zips in. Okay, so I've sewn on the velvet piping onto the patterned sides of the cushion cover, and now I'm onto the velvet. Now, just be aware that velvet has a pile, and as you can see from looking at these two, this is the same material, but this is with the pile going that way, and this is with the pile going the other way. So, generally speaking, with velvet, the pile goes the opposite way to what you would think. So if you are making clothes, the pile goes up your body, not down, and that gives you the rich colour, like this side. If the smooth is going down, it's a light colour, but if we turn it up the other way, it will always be a richer colour. So it's the same with cushions. If your cushion is the bottom of the cushion where you're going to put the zip in, the pile is going to go not downwards but upwards. So this is the correct way, if you like. So just think about that. So pile's going down, so I want that to be at the so that's going to be the top of my cushions. I'm going to turn that round, and then when you look at it that way, it's going to be the darker colour. So in other words, it's the smooth side up, rough side down. So this is going to be the bottom of the cushion. Now when I pinned on the other piping, when I came to the sewing machine, all my pins were the wrong way round, which is fine for me, but probably not for you. So if you start on the other side, at the top edge rather than the bottom edge, you will have all your pins the right way. So leave a good bit spare. Start, but we want the join in the bottom, don't we? So this is the bottom. So I'm going to put my edge like that, and then I'm going to turn it round so that I get my pins the right way around. Because if I start pinning with the pins this way, when I get onto the machine, they're all pointing the wrong way. So find the bottom of your cushion, put a pin in, and then turn it around so that you can start pinning it on with the pins pointing the other way. So I'm going to put a pin in, get up to that corner again, and then cut back an inch from the edge. And again, I'll put a few clips in this time so that I can demonstrate what I mean when I get to the machine, and I'll show you it being sewn on. And then go back and pin it on, turn it round that corner, get it nice and square. And keep working your way along. I think the most important thing is to butt those up really nicely so you get a nice square. What you don't want is this, where you just sort of let it go round the corner like that, because it doesn't look so nice. It looks more defined if you do the actual, and that's all about clipping it really close to the piping cord. So I'll go around these two, and then I'll show you how to sew it on with the piping foot on the machine. So we're back onto the machine now to sew the piping onto the cushion side. I've definitely changed my needle now. I'm using a 16 or 100 in metric, because the thickness when you get to the joins with the velvet, and when I was sewing on the velvet piping it was even thicker, because there can be, like, at times 5 layers, so do be aware of that. So with this one I haven't done the join, I've left it unjoined, and I'm going to start where I've got it pinned, and I'm just going to leave that until the end in case the fabric shunts. Now the fabrics that shunt most tend to be like chenilles and things like that. We've only got velvet on one side, so it might not be a problem, but it might shunt a bit. So I'm going to start here, I'm just going to reverse, go to the corner. Now if it had started to shunt, when I got to the corner it would have moved forward. This one hasn't yet, but it might do on the next one. So I'm going to put my needle down, turn the corner, and you'll notice that now we're using the left side groove of the piping foot, whereas when we were putting on the piping we were using the right one, and that's because we're just going in a different direction really. So we're going to go down here, and if the fabric starts to shunt, what we'll end up with is like an extra piece. So it is shunting a little bit, because you can see I've got a little bobble there. You see that little gap? So that's why sometimes doing those extra clips, because you can shunt this, carry on shunting it down, but now if you go it's going to be too far. So if you've got an extra clip a little bit higher up, that probably will be in the right place to do the turn. So I'm going to go to that first clip, put my needle down, lift and turn, and you can see I've got a bit of extra fabric now, so I need to push it out, do a nice corner there, and now I've definitely got shunting. Can you see? So I'm going to keep going along, keeping this on the edge of the fabric. I have to take the pins out as I go to move it along now because it is shunting quite a bit. You can see I've got quite a lot extra now. Just keep going. And now I will really need to do some more clips here, so I'm just going to put a few in while I'm away from it. Just be easier than when I get to it. I'm going to take that pin out and then I'm going to find where I want to turn. And actually, look, it's almost that first clip that has shunted quite a lot. Make sure my needle's down, right into that corner, lift, turn. And you can see I've got a lot now. So I'm just going to keep taking the pins out, putting edges to edges. The other way to do it is to stretch the under fabric as you go along, but actually that's much harder than just letting it shunt and then sorting it out at the end. You can see I've got a lot now. I'm going to take that out. I think I need to clip about there. I'm going to do a few extra just in case. Just help me decide, yeah. I'm going to go down to that first clip, put my needle down, turn. And this is where I've got to join it. So I'm just going to go up to the end of the where I sewed before and just cut the threads. And what happens is it's shunted all the way round and now it's just at the end, and now I can do the join. Whereas if I'd have joined it first of all, I would have had to unpick that now because of the shunting. So I'll do the join on the table here. So I'm going to open that up and do a right angle fold like that, and I'm going to lay the other one across. If I haven't got enough unpicked, then unpick some more. I think I've just about got enough. I'm going to lay it across like that, and I'm going to go underneath, and where that crease is the I've lost it now. Just fold it. This fabric creases quite well, so I'm going to crease in that right angle fold, lay that over, bring it under, and now I can see the crease. You can see I've got all the right angles. Can you see? And I'm just going to pin it along that crease. Actually, I'm just going to tighten it just a fraction, because always it needs to be a little bit tighter than you think, especially with this fabric shunting. And so let's just have a look at that. It's still a bit baggy. Can you see? It's not quite as tight as I want it. So it means I'm just going to shunt it. All it means is I've got to move that up a bit or across. So I'm just going to take out my pins. I'm just going to move it up a little bit, because all that's doing is tightening it. And then just pin from corner to corner again. And have another look. That's much better, because now it's quite taut, and when I pull it, it will go flat. So I'm going to sew across that next. You don't really need to take your piping foot off to do this, because just for short areas of straight sewing, it's fine to leave it on. So I've sewn across that now, and now I'm just going to trim away the seam allowance, and I'm going to go and press that open now so that it's nice and flat, because at the moment it's not. So I'm just going to go and press that, and then I'll come back and finish that off. So it's pressed nice and flat now. Now I can just tuck that piping cord in, trim it off, lay the other one next to it, make the other one just a fraction longer, tuck them in, and just pin it across the top there. And then just sew that bit that we haven't sewn down. So just that bit that we haven't done, I'm now going to sew across just to finish it off. that's it. So all the piping's now in one continuous piece. And we're ready, well, we're nearly ready to put the zips in. The next thing to do is to neaten all these edges. It's much better to do it now, because if you try and neaten it when they're together, you're going to have even more layers to neaten. So if you're going to zigzag, if you don't have an overlocker, then put your other foot back on, your normal either metal or transparent foot zigzag. And for zigzag, you need to trim away a bit of this seam allowance. Now, remembering which one you're going to put the zip in, you want a decent amount to put the zip in. I'm just going to check. So this is the bottom where the zip's going to go. So don't trim away too much. You need to leave, I'd say, a good maybe 3/4 of an inch, maybe a bit less. But not quite half an inch. So trim that away and do it round all 4 sides, but I'm going to probably use the overlocker to neaten it because it's much quicker for me. And then just put your foot down near the edge of the fabric and just see where your zigzag's going. So with your hand on the flywheel, turn it towards you. Sorry, we haven't put it in zigzag yet, so put it onto zigzag. That's number 5. And we need quite a wide zigzag for this. So normally this is a computerized machine. On a manual machine, it will be on the widest setting when you start, so you don't need to do anything. Mine isn't, so I just need to increase it a little bit. And you might want to bring the stitch closer together, so just reduce the stitch length a little bit, maybe to 1. And then with your hand, see which way the zigzag's going. There we go. So when it goes to the right, you want to just be clipping the edge of the fabric, just so that it neatens it. Now actually 1's too close, so I'm going to increase it to 2 and see what that's like. I don't want to be too close together, it'll take too long. Yeah, that's a good neatening edge. If I run along the whole of that, I'll show you what it looks like. So I'm just clipping the edge as I go. And if you trim the other side, if I trim this side, just do it so I can show you. I could literally go round the corner by just going around like that and carrying on. I'm just going to stop there to show you. So can you see that's zigzagged all the way along to neaten the edge. And that's perfectly adequate for your cushion. And if you do that to both sides, nothing will start fraying and get caught in the zip. I'm going to use the overlocker though, because it's much quicker. If you haven't used an overlocker before, then you really need to watch the video on how to thread and use your overlocker. But I'll just take you through a few basic things first of all. So basically the overlocker is going to cut the fabric and neaten it all in one go. So it's much quicker. And I'm going to put it on where I want it to cut. The cutter is on, so anything over this edge gets cut off. The blade is here. It runs without anything in it, so you don't need to get the fabric right under the foot. It will start to cut first, as you can see. And really, when this is why you need a good inch seam allowance, because otherwise there would not be enough width for your overlocker foot to do your neatening. Now it's quite thick there. If your overlocker isn't terribly new, if the blade's getting a bit old, you might find it doesn't like those joins. I'm just helping it a little bit. And then I can probably go around this corner if I'm careful. You can see the bit that it's cutting off. Lift that if it's going to go. see that's really nicely neatened and looks very professional. Sometimes with an overlocker you can overlock once the cushion is together, but I'm not doing that with this because it's quite thick fabric, this velvet, and I think even my overlocker, because it's a domestic one, will struggle with the thickness. So I'm going to go ahead now and neaten all the edges of my fabric. Obviously the other squares you don't have any piping to know how much to cut off, so just trim off about 1/4 centimetre if you're zigzagging and neaten it, and if you're on the overlocker, similarly just trim off 1/4. There's some markers on here to help you know what 1/4 inch is. Okay, so I'm going to do all the neatening next.